Okay, so welcome to this month's training available for all users. I'm Andrea Carey with the Data Center and excited to talk to you today about an advanced privacy understanding and skill. We are talking today about when a client declines consent to share in HMIS. Let's dive in. I do want to just remind you, this is a training for you, so please do ask questions. I know other folks will have those same questions. So as we're going through, please use chat or unmute using *6 on the phone to raise your question. All right, so I want to start off with a little bit of background just to make sure we're all on the same page. So some reminders about HMIS consent. This is, one of the ways that we use HMIS is for kind of automatic record keeping. When a client presents for services, when they ask for services from you, there is an implied consent from the client that you should serve them, and you need to do what you need to do as an agency in order to serve them. So we need to understand the number of people that we're serving, right? We need to be able to report back to funders. We need to just do some basic coordination of services. So record keeping as an agency for your own agency is allowable as clients present for services. But that is specifically within an agency, right? So when folks are presenting to your agency, they're looking to you for those services, and they don't necessarily see a whole network of other organizations, right? So it's really about that specific agency, that original agency that is providing services. So we can use HMIS for that automatic record keeping. And outside of that original agency, we need affirmative and informed consent from the client. So making sure that they know what their sharing choices are, and that information, collected and entered into HMIS is limited to your agency unless they consent. All right, so it's important to just keep in mind those two kind of separate circumstances: record keeping within the agency versus sharing with agencies besides your own, outside of that original agency. So we do want to remind folks that consent to share data is not required for services, right? So when someone is presenting for services to you and they decline to consent to share outside of your agency, you should still serve them, right? Your relationship with the client is not restricted by a client not wanting to share beyond your agency. So consent is not required for services. And once consent is given, the client absolutely has the right to withdraw future sharing. However, we don't have the power to, erase someone's memory once they've seen information, right? So you can't stop sharing that's already happened, that was already consented to. But you can absolutely cut off future sharing for future data collected. So that's just an important principle of the sharing choices that clients have. All right, and what do we use to govern all these sharing choices? The primary way that we govern this is the release of information. So this is, our consent documentation for data sharing. Of course, if you're not working with someone in person, verbal ROIs are allowable, but you do need to get the paper documentation of the ROI at your next in-person meeting. And there's 3 different sections that extend consent in the ROI. So we want to go over those specifically. First off, we've got the standard information section. This is about information that's visible across HMIS at NCCEH. this is the information used to search for a client. So when you're in HMIS and you're using client point to find a client ID, it's that information. So name, last four of the social, age from the date of birth. The second section is about visibility in HMIS across a data visibility group. So this is about visibility beyond that standard information within a network. Most HMIS visibility groups right now are about coordinated entry, about making sure that coordinated entry systems are efficient and connected and well coordinated. So in your local community, you'll have potentially some different varieties of HMIS visibility groups, from sharing between shelters and the coordinated entry project, to sharing between the coordinated entry project or the by name list entity to permanent housing programs. So that can differ depending on the project type and the purpose of that sharing. But section 2 is all about information about entry exits, service transactions, more of those details beyond the standard information in HMIS. And then section 3 of the ROI covers the coordinating group. And this is about sharing across a coordinating group outside of HMIS. So we know that when we are attending by name list meetings with the local coordinated entry system, you're talking about HMIS data. And so this provides an opportunity to acknowledge that and be transparent with the client and give them that choice. So the key thing here is that sections 1 and 2 are about sharing within HMIS. The actual software and parameters around projects are really key for that. And then section 3 with the coordinating group is outside HMIS. And clients have choices for each one of these sections. For section 1, it is a yes or no. You know, it's either yes to sharing, that sharing is on, or no, it's not. It's a kind of a light switch effect there. Either someone is searchable in our system or they are not searchable. For section 2, there's a little bit more choice there. You can someone can consent to sharing across that HMIS visibility group, and all of the providers that are in your visibility group would be able to view that data, or some. You can, clients can specify that they do not want their information shared with a particular provider or providers. Sometimes, you know, that happens on a rare occasion, but sometimes they've just had a bad experience. They don't want to have their information shared with a particular provider. So that is, you can respond as a yes or a no for all or some of the HMIS providers. And then lastly, for the coordinating group, a client can identify yes or no for those confidential community partner meetings. That's definitely harder to specifically isolate like one partner from, because the whole point of the coordinating groups are to bring everyone to the same table. So that's really more of that yes or no kind of absolute there. All right, any questions so far? Okay, we're just getting into the good stuff here. So what happens when a client says no? What do you need to do? First off, you need to create a new client ID. It's important to not kind of muddy the waters, to not apply the client's, the client may have consented or not consented to sharing with another agency in the past. And we want to make it really clear about the client's wishes for their consent or the declining consent in this circumstance. So you really want to make sure that's specific by creating a new client ID. We cannot limit visibility in different ways. For example, the standard information, the searchability of a client. If a client said yes to searchability a year ago for a particular instance, then that stands, right? They consented to that in that time period. If they're now saying no, they don't want someone, in the system to be able to see that they're a current client, then we have to create a new profile in order to, specifically follow that client's request in this moment. So first thing, when a client says no, create a new client ID. The second action to take is that on the eROI, the electronic ROI tab, you want to mark permission as no. This is, we only have two options for permission, yes or no. So if a client says no to one section, we want to make sure that that's really clear, and permission should be set to no, so that there's an indicator for agencies to look into the details of what were the particular sections or circumstances around that no. And then lastly, you do want to attach a paper copy of the ROI to document the specific sections declined. So in HMIS, on that ROI tab, there's this handy kind of alligator clip icon or button on the right-hand side, and you can attach a scanned copy there for reference. The key thing is that in the HMIS profile, we need to be able to say it was a no for section 1, section 2, or section 3, or all three, right, or whatever combination. So there needs to be a way to mark that. All right, so let's go through the different options and what's really happening in the system for each of these sections. If a client says no to ROI section 1, the standard information, that means that agencies outside the original agency cannot view or search for the client for this particular ID. This is a picture down below of what that will look like. If someone happened to enter an ID, it will just say that no client exists in the system for that given ID. And if someone searched for the name or combinations of the name, then they just won't appear in that list of results in a client point search. You do want to make sure that you're marking the eROI permission as no for section 1, and then attaching that paper copy of the ROI to document which section was declined. All right, so this is the impact of saying no to section 1. For no for ROI section 2 on HMIS visibility, we want to make sure we set up this understanding. So our agencies participate in visibility and sharing groups, and clients can say no to all or some of the partners. So when your agencies sign sharing agreements, there is a group added in HMIS for specific, covering those specific sharing agreement parameters and sharing particular aspects of the client record. So many of our CE sharing groups cover the entry-exit tab, making sure that different partners in the community can see just the basic enrollment dates for a client. So those are added to all the records after those sharing agreements are signed. And if a client declines, then we actually need to manually remove those groups of projects when a client blocks sharing. So the way that this kind of manifests in HMIS is that we, system administrators at the data center, we add the specific group or specific providers that need to be blocked from this sharing. So that's why it is, again, really important to mark the eROI as no, attach the paper ROI, and document what is the client's wish in this case. Is it no to all of Section 2, any of the visibility groups that this project normally participates in, or just some providers? And then no for Section 3 with the coordinating group. This means that the agency can't identify the client during those community partner meetings outside of HMIS reports. And we want to explain to the client what the impact of this means. It means that, services that you might normally provide referrals to in your community might not be able to be provided, right? If you have local partners for employment, food, childcare assistance, they may need a referral with the name, right, with the client information. And so you want to make sure that that's understood from the client and just what the impact of not being able to coordinate with your community partners means. And then again, emphasizing this a lot here, mark the eROI permission as no, attach the paper ROI to document. All right, and so again, for every circumstance when the client says no, you're going to create a new client ID, you're going to mark the permission as no, and you're going to attach the paper ROI for the specific sections that the client declined. And then the key last part is you've got to reach out to the data center help desk. Email us at HMIS@NCCEH.org so that we can implement the client's wishes. Those different sections of the ROI, the different aspects of how that impacts the client's data in HMIS, that needs to be executed by a system administrator. So if your client says no to standard information sharing, we need to go in and lock down that profile entirely. If a client says no to a particular provider or an entire sharing group, system administrators need to go in and lock that down, block that sharing. For the Section 3, the local coordinating group, you really have the control over what is shared in that meeting. So that is, but you do want to email the data center so that we understand what the decline aspects were. All right, let me just go back really quick. Any questions about the action steps to take when a client declines sharing as part of the ROI and privacy conversation? All right, and you can chat or unmute with *6 if you're on the phone. Okay. So if a client is still concerned, there are actually some additional options. So sometimes folks are, dealing with really sensitive situations, and they might be worried about, an experience with someone who maybe has access to HMIS. That would be a really great example of a time to use the unnamed record option. So if there are concerns about folks with HMIS access or in the homeless response system, an unnamed record is an option that can be utilized. So unnamed records, what that means is that they have their name is completely masked. So first and last name don't appear. And the only way to actually find that client is through the client ID. And so in this case, it is really important to make sure you save the client ID in a secure location so that your agency are the only ones with that crosswalk connecting the unnamed record to this particular client. Unnamed records are a little bit more intensive in terms of the steps to create an HMIS. So what you're going to need to do is collect client information on paper forms and then contact the data center so that we can switch your license to create unnamed records. This is a setting on each individual person's license that can be activated, meaning that you can create and manage unnamed records, but it is an all or nothing setting. So you need to have that activated for the unnamed record and then deactivated once you're done and once you've created that profile. So contact us with that need, and we can help facilitate that for you. There are other ways that that you can respond to clients that are concerned about a profile in HMIS. Remember that clients can decline any individual question in the HMIS intake and HMIS data collection. And so one option is that clients can use a code name or pseudonym or partial name to be identified in HMIS. You would want to make sure you're marking the name data quality as partial. There's that drop down item after name. And you want to know, just full disclosure for the agency, that this will look like an error. It will be reported as an error, as incomplete information for your HMIS project. However, if that is the way to, acknowledge the client's wishes, build that relationship with the client, then you're going to want to follow that, and you can explain that error in other settings. All right, and then just when in doubt, you want to collect information on paper forms and contact us. So if you're not sure if this client is going for the unnamed record or just needs to be locked down for Section 2 decline to consent, contact us. Let us know what the situation is, and we can help you navigate that. There are options for agencies to learn about how to lock down information for clients, particularly with that Section 2. But we've found so far that many agencies do not wish to do that extra training, and it's easier for us to facilitate. It's just another thing to know how to do in the system. So reach out to the data center if you think your agency is, confronting complicated situations in greater frequency than is really feasible for reaching out to us. We want to work with you to make sure we have the best tools at hand to protect the client's right to consent to share and protect their information in HMIS. All right. Any questions from folks about what you need to do as a case manager, as an agency administrator, for when a client declines? All right, not seeing any questions. So I am going to log into the training site here and just, we can just show you a couple of these things that we identified. Oh, did I hear someone have a question?
Yeah, Andrea, I was just
Absolutely.
wondering if we're going to get copies of the slides like later.
Absolutely, yes. We will post the recording and the slides on our HMIS News archive just as soon as it's done processing. And that website is in the chat.
Thanks.
Absolutely. So just wanted to point out a couple things that we talked about for those more extreme situations. I'm in the training site, so this is a fake client, and just wanted to remind you of where you can mark the data quality for name. So there's an option here for partial street name or code name reported under there. So if a client needed to utilize that, that's an option. And then in terms of an unnamed record, I can just show you here that there's a specific setting where we say you can allow user to manage unnamed records only. And I think I'll have to log out to activate that. There we go. So now it's changed. So now when I create an unnamed record, I actually enter in the full name of the client if to save that to follow the data collection standards. But then I'm going to create an unnamed client, and this is what shows up. So I get a client ID that I need to save securely, and then the name is totally scrambled, unrecognizable. So you'll be able to record other information, you know, your demographics, all of your entry/exit information, but it just won't be identified as that client. All right, any other questions? Okay, I do want to point out some additional resources before we wrap up this recording. So we have, you know, privacy documents on our admin page. We've got additional tips on privacy and more details on the privacy specific page, including our Keep NC Safe guide, which is good to have handy at your desk. Excuse me. And then there's some other just potential resources here. Potential resources here for the HMIS proposed rule, which goes through the security requirements, and the FTC actually has some guidance for online security, which is just always helpful to have for your reference and for clients' reference. All right, so if you have questions, concerns, or clients that have declined that you need to reach out to us about, please let us know the situation with client ID and what section the client declined at hmis@ncch.org.